Hi, this is the second video that I've created. I'm actually a registered sex offender, and today I really want to talk about protecting children. And as I started to look back on my case and the people that I met while I was incarcerated who also were sex offenders, the common story that I heard from the vast majority of them was that they actually committed a sexual offense against someone that they actually knew. Whether it was a niece, a daughter, or I shouldn't say they actually committed it, but that they were accused of it. So I just surprisingly, we often hear about the Garridos and those people who, Lunsford, the Walsh, people whose children were actually snatched off the street, allegedly snatched off the street and murdered by someone who was a convicted sex offender. Well, in the case of Walsh, I don't believe that the person that was finally accused of killing his son, even though there was a lot of contradiction in that, was actually, I don't think that person was actually a convicted sex offender. He was a convicted murderer or something like that. But can these sex offender registries really protect children? Even though they put a lot of restrictions and continue to put a lot of restrictions on sex offenders. But when I started looking at studies, studies have indicated that 90% of all children who are molested, 90% of them are molested by a relative or someone that they actually know, the family knows. 90%. So when I think about that, I'm thinking, wow, okay, if 90% of these offenders are family or friends to this child, how do we protect that child? When we look at the sex offender registry, I believe there's less than 6% of those who are previously convicted of a sex crime actually go on to commit another sex crime. That was a study that was done in a three-year study. So, we're looking at 90% of all new sex crimes are committed by someone who has no previous conviction of a sex crime. Will the registry protect those children? Absolutely not, because those offenders aren't on the sexual registry yet. Will those who are convicted of sex crimes reoffend and assault children again? Well, according to this three-year study, less than 6% of them will. So 94% of all sex offenders, whom some people say can't be rehabilitated, actually go on to never commit another sexual offense, at least not within the 3-year. Some studies even longer than that, 6 years, 7-year studies. So what is the biggest threat to our children today? How do we protect children from guys like me, a sex offender? Well, it's me that you don't have to worry about. The person you should worry about is your uncles, your cousins, your child's best friends, school friends. These are the people that we need to spend our dollars on and trying to prevent them from becoming tomorrow's sex offenders. So what needs to take place? Well, I think a lot of education. We talk about we don't want to teach sex in schools. Well, it's happening, folks. Teenagers are having sex. Those in preteens are touching one another. And we need to educate them that, one, you can go to prison in some states for a mandatory minimum of 10 years. You can spend the rest of your life labeled as a sex offender on a national registry where everyone have access to. You could have the possibility of never getting a job the rest of your life. You can never become a political figure or a public figure of any type other than making yourself a YouTube video and trying to get your message out there. So we need to protect children. And the way we do that, instead of taking all this money and constantly spending it on sex offender registry and notifications and trying to address that potential 6% of those sex offenders that will go out there and commit another crime, Why not take money and spend it on addressing the 90% of those who will commit their first offense this year? This year, 90% of all sex crimes are committed by someone who had never been charged or convicted of a sexual crime before. Wake up, people. The registry does not work. Education, removing pornography and sexual content from in front of the eyes of adults and children, perhaps that will work. Studies should look at why in the 60s were men able to have sex with 10-year-olds in the state of Georgia. The law wasn't changed until, I believe, sometime in the 80s. But we need to educate adults and teens and those before teens that they should not allow people to touch them. And they should say no, and they should report it. But we should not be incarcerating people for 10 years or more and putting them on registries for the rest of their life when they have a small chance of ever touching another child again. It's time we wake up. Time we study statistics and address our own fears of sex in our society. Thank you.